Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become the stepping stones to growth and clarity. I'm your host, Ezekiel Iferia, and today's guest has a story that embodies the very essence of the show. So, Mary Korn is the author of Fired to Inspired and the founder of a social enterprise that has employed over 1,300 people across 30 states. But her journey started with the terrifying setbacks. 2 months into what she thought was her job until retirement, she was fired. And as a single parent with two teenagers heading to college, she found herself at what she calls ground zero. But instead of letting that define her, she rebuilt her career by helping others facing barriers to employment. She's here to talk about turning crisis into calling and finding purpose when the rug is pulled out from under you. So, Mary, thank you so much for joining us on FailCraft. It's truly an honor to have you here today.
I'm honored that you selected me as a guest.
All right. So let's dive in. Your story starts with a moment that is many people's nightmare. So you were a single parent with two kids heading to college, and you were fired from a job you thought would last until retirement. So can you take us back to that moment? So what did that initial shock and fear feel like? And just tell us generally what the rock bottom moments for you were like.
Oh, okay. So when I was fired, I was absolutely terrified. And if I look at the mistake I made, I never should have taken the job in the first place. But to answer your question, I felt like the ground beneath me just gave. I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills, support my kids. I was absolutely terrified. And to make matters worse, I had no clue of where I was going, and I had no clue of what I wanted to do. And the mistake I made was, without doing a lot of soul searching, I took the job because I liked the stability. I thought the offices were going to be really pretty. I thought the boss was going to be nice. And from day one, I knew that this was headed for disaster. So, in answer to your question, you asked, what did it feel like? It was absolutely terrifying. I did not know how I was going to survive, and I honestly thought I might be living under a bridge with my children. That's how terrified and scared I was.
All right. Okay, so Mary, what was the very first thought or action that helped you pivot from despair to deciding to build something entirely new?
So I knew giving into my fear was simply not an option. So I got trained, and by the way, this is in my book, and it's a workbook I'll be putting on my website. So call to action is my website will shortly have workbooks that deals with legs, three critical legs of what you do when you're absolutely lost, terrified, and you don't have a job.
Mm.
And I know I'm not being sequential, but the three legs, just very briefly, is you have to overcome the fear, because if you have a family to support, you cannot. Fear is a luxury you can't afford. So to overcome fear, I did something that is so I did one workbook on overcoming fear, another workbook on finding your life purpose and your mission, and the third one is using informational interviews to move on with your life. So getting back to your question, the first thing I did was I picked up the phone and I called everybody I knew. I had this whole, people can fire you, but they can't take away your Rolodex. So I got on the phone and
Mm.
I called absolutely everybody I know, and I scheduled to meet with them. I told them what was going on with my life. A lot of them thought it was funny, and they were like, "What? You only had that job for 2 months and you got fired?" And then I started to do what's called informational interviews. I started to research um, all the people who were doing work that I thought I might be interested in, and I called them to have exploratory discussions. I got on the phone right away and I called everybody and everyone. And then when I ran out of people to call on, I researched people I didn't know. And I learned a technique that I learned years ago, which is the art of informational interviews. And I would call CEOs of associations, and I left a very brief script. I said, I have skills in marketing and sales, and I just want to schedule an exploratory call to see how my skills work with what you do. So the answer to the question is, even though I was terrified, I was on the phone the first day of getting fired for 6 to 8 hours.
Okay. So, Mary, you mentioned being inspired by your mother. So, how did, hearing stories of resilience from others specifically help you navigate your own fear and paralysis in that moment?
I love your question. So, my mother was a great inspiration for me because she was a Holocaust survivor. And when she was 13 years old, she jumped off of a train that was meant to go to a death camp. She jumped off a train with SS guards, and she fearlessly jumped off that train. And then fast forward, when Hitler knew his days were up, he closed the concentration camps and he forced a death march. And if you collapsed or you fell, you were shot on the spot. And my mother escaped. So it's her bravery throughout her life that I always thought, if my mother could do this, I can do this. And then on top of that, she came to this country with a single mother with two small kids with $130 to her name. And somehow she put us through college and she raised two daughters.
Hmm.
So I always
All right.
channel her when I'm terrified.
Okay, that is really inspiring. So you built a business specifically to hire people with barriers, to employment. So did your experience of being let go give you new empathy or perspective on what it means to be unemployable?
Totally, totally. When you feel so vulnerable, actually, in some ways, getting fired is a gift because it makes you so humble and so respectful and so compassionate. And that compassion, that respect that I had for everyone who worked for me, especially people who could not see, could not use their hands. We had some people who had terminal cancer. It was just such an amazing journey. And my heart was always filled, as a leader, was always filled with compassion because the people I hired were people no one wanted to hire. They didn't know how to hire them, they didn't know how to manage them. And after my mother's experience, and then the movie Schindler's List,
Movie.
it was a movie about a businessman in Germany that created jobs for Jews. And all he wanted to do was save their lives. And by having them work for him, he saved lives. And that movie and my mother were two major inspirations in wanting to hire the most unemployable people with minimal opportunity for jobs.
Okay, okay. So for you, what was the biggest practical hurdle you faced in transitioning from employee to entrepreneur, especially starting from a place of crisis?
Oh, Ezekiel, the list goes on and on. Every month, not knowing if I was going to make payroll. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I'm not a finance person, so I had to do my own bookkeeping. It would take me hours to take what a bookkeeper would do in like 5 minutes. It was a major transition, but it was a relief because after you've been an employee, it's really nice not to have a boss who doesn't respect you or care about you or value you. Because if in Ezekiel, I hope you never have that experience of having to report to someone who simply doesn't care about you or value you. And, uh, the buck stops with you. It's a big
Okay.
difference than it's a big difference than being an employee.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. So you say that meaningful work isn't a luxury, it's a birthright. So how did your setback clarify that belief for you?
When I started to hire people who were blind, and I started to hire people who had no use of their hands, and I hired disabled veterans, and they would tell me they searched for jobs for 6, 7 years because no one wanted to hire them. And
Hmm.
I would get on weekly Zoom calls with all of my employees. I felt like I was doing God's work. I felt like I was doing the work I was destined to do. And when you're doing work that you know you should be doing, it feels really good and it feels really fulfilling.
So for Mary, for the person listening right now who just perhaps got fired or laid off and feels like they are at their own ground zero. So uh, what is the first most critical step you would tell them to take today? For someone who is terrified and unsure of the future.
So, uh, first of all, I'm not proposing or espousing a religion, but I think that each of us has intuition, and sometimes the universe finds answers for you. In answer to your question,
Mm,
listen listen to the messages that are coming to you in terms of what to do next. And if they don't present themselves, believe it or not, by talking to people you love and respect and sharing with people what's going on in your life, it's amazing how many things could happen through your network of people that are close to you. And for me, I'll never forget, I had a friend who since passed away. And I told him I was fired, and the first thing he did was just laugh. He laughed really hard because he couldn't believe I got fired in just 2 months. But then he introduced me to all of these people, and he did something I will never forget, which is you are talented, you are much more than your job, you are worth so much more than a title, and you just have to believe you have a purpose. And for your listeners who lost their job, just to have faith. There is a purpose, there is a reason. And when you're fired and you're at ground zero, you become very creative in things that you're open to. You're unbelievably creative.
mm,
And for me, when I got fired, I actually went to all of my employees' homes to interview them. And I met with them regularly in their homes. So some of them, I live in Columbus, Ohio, they lived in Cleveland. But I wanted to see their home. I wanted to see how they lived. I wanted to know them. And these are things I never would have thought of doing if I hadn't been fired. So just being open.
mm.
For the people who've been fired, there is a good to this story. They just don't know it yet.
Oh wow. So you're saying being fired that is has its own perks.
Yes. Yes. I never would
Okay.
have started this company if I hadn't been fired.
Mm.
Never.
All
I
right.
never would have had the guts to do it.
Great opinion there. Really inspiring one. So after turning that devastating, firing into a company and that has now helped thousands find work. So what does being successful truly mean to you currently?
So I sold my business. And by the way, any of your listeners that have an entrepreneur in them, it's really important for them to think about their end game first. I sold the business and I spend my life now because I have a message, and the message is get over your fear, live your life purpose, and if you don't know what it is, spend the time to get to know what your purpose is. And the third one is reach out to anyone doing work you think you want to do and take the courage and contact them by LinkedIn, by Facebook, by social media, and ask to have a conversation because the power of talking could have everything to do with your destiny and your future.
Wow, wow, wow. Great piece of advice there, and a fantastic response as well. So, finally, for our listeners who are facing, say, maybe a career transition and want to check out, your book, Fired to Inspired, or your coaching resources. So, where's the best place for them to go?
They should go to my website, which is Fired to Inspired, and very soon they're going to have workbooks on how to overcome fear, find their life purpose, and how these have these crucial conversations that could lead them to the business they're supposed to launch or the career they're meant to do.
All right,
And
all right.
and if they're interested in a one-on-one a call with me, they could indicate that on my site.
Okay, fantastic. So, Mary, it's been such an inspiring conversation with you, and I am indeed excited to have this discussion with you on the podcast today.
Ezekiel, anything that you're once you know your life purpose and your life mission, anything and everything is possible.
Yes,
Everything.
indeed, indeed.
And I'm so honored that you invited me as your guest.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you, Mary.
You too.